Hello everybody, welcome back to another video here on my channel. I decided because I filmed a very short video right before this that I was just gonna go ahead and hop into another video that I've been planning on making. In today's video, we are going over my physical TBR, how many books I have left to read on my shelves, which ones I've kind of already tackled a little bit, and of course I'll get to show you guys my shelves, each one, and go through each book individually. I just want to preference this by saying technically I had at the start of the year, which is when I wanted to start this video or make this video, I had on January 1st 98 physical books on my TBR. I've accumulated a few books since then, but I've also read a substantial amount. We are almost done with February. We're on like the last week. We have about 5 days left of February, and I'm about to finish, I think, my 12th book for this year. Without further ado, let's go ahead and go in depth into each shelf. I forgot to say this real quick before we jump in. This entire row, the top of my shelves, is dedicated to Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I've read for a long portion of my life a lot of Nancy Drews. I'd say probably half of what's up here. I don't know where I actually stopped at, and then I've read a few Hardy Boys and also some of these Nancy Drew mystery stories. I'm not counting any of these because eventually I will redo and restart and actually keep track of the last one I read, but I'm not there yet. That's a future me problem, so I'm just gonna kind of cancel out that and just say those are not on the list. Just keep that in mind. This might be out of focus because the lens I'm using a 50 mil and it has a really low aperture, which means like really small depth of field. So pretty much if I'm in focus, they're not going to be. First, we have my Matt Kruse trilogy. I have actually tackled every single one of these books. Absolutely loved it. Then we have my Beautiful Creature series. I've also tackled every single one of them. Next, we have my Adrienne Young books. Every single one of them as well. I have tackled. I did a good job on that. The only two on the shelf that I have not read is actually Powerless and Reckless. I just got these pretty much for Christmas, and then I think the first week of January from my mom as a little present, Christmas present pretty much. So those are the first two I've not tackled. I also want to collect the Powerful, but it's blue version, or it has like a blue ribbon, because it's the same height as these two, unlike the white version that is like really small, really miniature. First, we have the Hotel Nantucket. I did read this as the only Ellen Hilderbrand book that I'm keeping. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue was my favorite book last year. I have not actually read The Host. That is on my 25 books I want to tackle in 2025, I do believe. And also Fourth Wing, I'm currently reading. Stay tuned for that reading vlog. However, the entire Twilight series, I did tackle that a few years ago. I guess I'll be keeping it. I'm kind of iffy on if I like it or not. Then we have my Veronica Roth section. Yes to Divergent, I read that, loved it. Read that in like middle school. Absolutely loved it. Recently just found, like a couple years ago, The Fates Divide and Carve the Mark. Also read that. Those two are my favorite. I love those two books so much. That was such a great duology, and also it wasn't as popular in my opinion, so it made it even better. Absolutely love this. This whole entire shelf pretty much is read. We're getting a little bit lower, so I'm not going to necessarily be in the camera. We have my Stephen King collection. Of course, Christine, my favorite book, the only book I have duplicates of, and also I did just tackle in October The Stand, but I have not read Needful Things or Different Seasons. These Silent Woods I just tackled this year, and I absolutely loved it. The Woman Outside My Door I tackled a few years ago, if not at the beginning of last year, and I loved it as well. With the Lucy Foley books, I have not read The Paris Apartment, but I did read The Guest List. It was okay, it just wasn't my favorite. Don't Let Her Stay I just picked up for my birthday in October. I have not tackled it just yet. However, then we have two Frida McFadden books. I did read The Housemaid and I did like it, and I just recently picked up The Inmate, which was perfect because I said if I ever found this in a thrift store, I wanted to buy it because I'm trying not to buy too many books this year, and I found this for $1. Then I have The Girl on the Train that I read at the beginning of last year. Absolutely loved it as well. It's one of those where you see them all the time in thrift stores. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be so good, but it turned out pretty decent. And then one of my favorite thrillers I actually have is The End of Her. I love this book. I don't know why. I just felt like it was so good. Lastly, we have the Millennium series. I have yet to tackle this, and of course the iPad, but we're not worried about that. Now we have a little bit of a mixed shelf. The Renegades trilogy I did actually tackle by Marissa Meyer. I have yet to read the Lunar Chronicles. I only have Cinder, Cress, and Winter. I think I'm missing novellas potentially. Of course, the Caraval trilogy I did tackle. I loved it. So good. House of Salt and Sorrow and also House of Roots and Ruin I just picked up pretty much for my birthday. I have yet to tackle this, but I'm so excited to. Red Rising I have yet to tackle, but it is one of those on my 25 books of 2025. I did read The Legend of Story County. I love this book. It was a 5-star read a couple years ago. Then we have my Infernal Devices, and I have yet to read this. This is Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess. We then move on to my Legend trilogy. I don't remember what this is actually called, but it's Legend, Prodigy, and Champion. I enjoyed it. I read it last year during the summer. I think it was a pretty good YA dystopian series, but it is one that I've contemplated on getting rid of. Next, we have The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. I have not read these just yet, but I'm so excited to. Then we have ACOTAR, or A Court of Thorns and Roses. Again, I have not read that just yet. Honorable mention, Throne of Betrayal by Brianna Wilson. I love this book, and book 2 is eventually coming out, and I'm also so excited to read it. Then we have two Anthony newer books. Technically, I've read All the Light We Cannot See, and because of this book, I went and picked up Cloud Cuckoo Land for my birthday. I haven't read this one just yet. And lastly, we have Red Queen and Glass Sword. I have not read those just yet. This shelf is one of those shelves where I wasn't sure what to do. We have a lot of coffee table books and other miscellaneous books, especially a lot of F-16s and stuff. Then we have where I had this muscle car one because it's a little too tall, but it fits perfectly with all these books sitting on top. Then my Bibles, extra Bibles or Bible journals, things that I just don't need anymore in my end table since I have a new Bible. So we're just gonna talk from the Gold of Exodus all the way over to Richard Hammond. The Gold of Exodus I read a few years ago. It was a 5-star read. I absolutely loved it. Same with Unbroken. It was so good. The Heart and the Fist I read just I think in Vegas 2 years ago. It was okay. It just wasn't as great as Unbroken or some of the other ones that I found, but I absolutely loved it still the same. Dale Jr. I have yet to read, but that is on my 25 books I want to read in 2025. American Sniper by Chris Kyle. I absolutely love that book. It was so good and I recommend it. It's a classic. Walk on Water is actually a daily devotional from somebody that is related to my husband. I tackled that last year. It took me a whole year to read that book, probably the longest I've ever read a book before, technically. Another book that I absolutely love, this is about the Vietnam War. My husband's family knows this guy, this author, and this book was so great. I read it, I think in 2019, 2020, and I absolutely loved it, rated it 4 or 5 stars. Also, I've been thinking about rereading that. Then we have 6 Hours One Friday by Max Lucado. It's a Christian book. I liked it a lot. It had a lot of lessons in the back that I've never actually tackled, so maybe I'll circle back and tackle those eventually. Then we have my Elsie Densmore books. I only have 2 out of the series, but I would love to collect the entire series. We do have a book that Josh was given after his dad passed away. It's Chicken Soup for the Grieving Soul. I have not read it and I probably will never read it. Then we have The Well by Mark Hall. This is actually from the Casting Crowns lead singer, and I love this, and especially their album Come to the Well. It's one of my favorite. I had it on CD. I still do technically, but I listened to them and I love this book. I highly recommend this if you are a Christian. And then we have The Sinking of Titanic Eyewitness Accounts. This is the actual copy, just re-illustrated basically to a newer times, but this is the same one that they made in 1912 when the Titanic sank. And then we have The Shack, another Christian book with so much thinking. I recommend this book to so many people. The way it made me think about God, how he portrays himself to everybody, and also how heaven is supposed to be. I think that is so great. So highly recommend that. And finally on the shelf, the only other book, the second book that I have not read is Richard Hammond's On the Edge. This is life revolving around or after his crash. If you know about the big crash that almost ended his life, you may know what this book is about then. Alright, now we're on bookcase 2. This one's going to be a real fun one in my opinion. First, let's start with this Agatha Christie book. Technically, I have not read a single one of these. There's 5 stories in one, except for NRM. I did read that one. I actually enjoyed that. It was a 3-star though, because I don't think I'm gonna remember it in a couple months. I just read it, I think this month or the end of last month. But I have to read all of these. I'm also going to skip over this electronics. This is just electrical. This is a good to know knowledge type thing, but I'm not gonna sit here and necessarily put it on my physical TBR. Of course, we have Narnia. I read that at the beginning of last year. Then we have another Agatha Christie book. This is Poirot Loses a Client, or it's also called Dumb Witness. I just tackled this one of the months of this year and I loved it as well. My second oldest book on the shelf is The Story of San Michelle. It's about to be 100 years old. I put it on a TBR thinking I was maybe gonna try and tackle it. I never got around to it. The Little Book Room I did tackle. The Treasure of Pleasant Valley I did tackle a couple of years ago. I loved it. It was like a little bit of romance, but it was Western and I thought it was so intriguing. I really enjoyed it. Then we have The Black Stallion. This is on my 25 books I want to read in 2025. I have yet to tackle it. We have The Egyptians. This book, technically, it's not like the normal book that I necessarily want to read, and there was a time that I did read this to a point. I don't know how far I got into it, so I'm not going to count it as my physical TBR. But it is here. It's like a reference book. Then we have The Family Treasury of Children's Stories. I've read a few of these in here. It's not really one I'm going to put on my physical TBR because this is more for like little kids, I guess you could say, or for telling my son stories before bed. Next we have The Giver. I did read The Giver and I read Gathering Blue. I have yet to read Messenger and Son. I'm still working on The Giver, but I'm gonna say it's half there. I've read 2 of the 4 books. Remember the Alamo I did read. The White Witch Doctor I have not read, but it's also on my 25 books of 2025. This is gonna be the easiest way to do this. I have 4 books then after that. The Shrouded Walls and the Dark Shore. I do believe this is just Lucy Carmichael and that's not the author. Warwick's Woman. Lots of W's in that one. And last we have the Storrington Papers. These 4 I have yet to read, to tackle. They are older style books that I got from my neighbor after she passed away, but I just haven't gotten around to them, which is fine. Then we have Treasure Island. I did tackle that a long time ago and I reread it a couple years ago. The Hobbit I put on many TBRs. I just haven't gotten around to it, to be honest. I tackled Little Women I think 2 years ago. I enjoyed it. It just wasn't as good as people hype it up to be, but I like the copy I have compared to the newer one. ones. Then we have The Bishop's Mantle. I have yet to tackle this one. Again, another Egypt book that I won't be actually including on my physical TBR just because it's more of like a reference style one. Understood Betsy, this red one, this is actually my oldest book that I know of on my physical TBR, or at least on my bookcases. My edition that I have is a 1917 edition, and also I just tackled it last night. I started it last night and finished it last night at work. Then I have Black Beauty. I have not read that. Also, I have a Fundamentals of Photography. Again, it's more of a reference book. I'll eventually probably tackle it, but I'm not including it this year on my physical TBR. Then we have an Agatha Christie. This is Crooked House. I have not read this one. The Mousetrap and Other Plays. I have not tackled that one as well, but I did a couple years ago read And Then There Were None, and I rated that one 5 stars. And then the last thing on the shelf is, again, a hieroglyphics, an Egyptology reference book. I feel like this shelf is a really good shelf. First, we have my Emily Henry books. Every single one of them I've actually read. Then we have The Unhoneymooners. I did tackle that a few years ago. That was actually my first technical, like, romance type book that was hyped up on Book Talk, BookTube. That was the first one I read. Then we have all of these Lucy Score books. I have not read any of them. We have Forever Never, we have the Knock 'Em Out trilogy, and then we have Rock Bottom Girl. I just picked this one up at Aldi's not too long ago, but I have not read a single one of these, and I do have, I think, Forever Never on my 25 books I want to read in 2025. And my final thing on the shelf is all Nicholas Sparks. But don't worry, every single one of these paperbacks I have read. Majority of these hardbacks I have also read. Let me tell you the ones that I have not read. Safe Haven, The Last Song, The Rescue, and finally A Bend in the Road. I've only not read 4 out of the 20 or 22 sitting on my shelf. That's pretty decent. I will give me that. Second to last shelf. Technically, I have yet to read One of Us is Lying. I've thought about getting rid of this so many times, but I've kept this book. Depending on if I pick it up within the next probably 6 months. If I don't, I'll probably just get rid of it. But I have tackled To All the Boys I Loved Before, this trilogy. Of course, I've tackled all my Colleen Hoover books. All the Tea in China I just read last year, and I enjoyed it. It was like a 4-star read or a 3-star read. Pretty decent. Maybe would recommend it, but won't read any more books from this author. I have yet to read Flock just yet. I picked this up because it was in the YA section, and then after bringing it home I realized it's not YA at all. They just misplaced it. I might read it and I might continue the series. I'm very interested in it. Then we have my Colleen Cobble section. I love this section so much. I have yet to read The Lightkeeper's Daughter. I just picked this one up for about 50 cents I do believe, and all of these for 50 cents as well. I have read Tidewater Inn and Rosemary Cottage, but I have not tackled the last one in the trilogy, Seagrass Pier. That is the next one. Probably next month I will end up tackling it. What started this entire collection, which isn't very much, but what started my love for Colleen Cobble is this book right here called Lone Star Sanctuary. I read it in 2020 or 2021 when I was pregnant with our son and we were stationed in Wisconsin. I absolutely loved this. It was a mystery and a Western and Christian with a subplot of romance, and I thought it was so good. I do want to collect the rest of this series. There's only about 3 more books. Then we have a book that I got for free when we were out in Vegas from a community garage sale. It's called The Blood Sisters. I have yet to read this, as well as If He Had Been With Me and Where the Crawdads Sing. I've not read those 2 either. Sarah's Key I read a few years ago. It was a 5-star. Absolutely loved it. And at the end of Vegas, when we were about to leave at the beginning of 2024, I picked up Ashes and Snow from a My Free Little Library. I have yet to read that one. My latest book I just picked up is Every Summer After for $1.59 at a Goodwill here in Kentucky. I haven't read that yet, but we're creeping up on summer. It's slowly starting to get warmer, so I might read that here soon. I finally tackled Archer's Voice. That was on my 25 books I want to read in 2025. I enjoyed it. I just think it was a little bit overhyped. I have never read Breaking the Code, but I've always wanted to keep it for some reason. It's a memoir, and I've had it since maybe 2016. I haven't read it just yet, but I think maybe soon, maybe this year, I'll try and tackle it. A Little Life I picked up for my birthday, but I have not read it. Same with Aragon Eldest and Brysinger. I have not read those just yet, but I do want to read that series. I think maybe I read a little bit of Aragon when I was a kid, since my sister had a first edition when it first came out, but I don't remember anything about it, so I'm just gonna say I haven't read it. And then we do have book 2 of the Game of Thrones or Fire and Ice series, which is Clash of Kings. I have not read that one just yet. On to my final shelf, because the shelf below is just books I want to get rid of. First book on the shelf is actually Beauty by Bill Wallace. This is my childhood favorite horse book. I absolutely loved it. I love the sadness in it. I love the farm-like style. I just like the whole story. I have that, and that will always stay on my shelf. And then we have my Mary Downing handbooks I read as a kid as well. I loved all these. They were so good, and I collected a few of them. I think I got rid of a few over the years, but these ones have been the ones to stay, and I do want to get a few of them that I remember, like A Doll in the Garden. Maybe add to the collection so our son could read these later in life. Then I have Ender's Game. I technically read part of Ender's Game. I didn't know it was part of a series, and I want to reread it, kind of like The Giver. So it's on my physical TBR, but I think since I tackled it, I could also count it not on my physical TBR, but I personally have it on there. The Familiars I read in middle school, maybe? It was elementary school or middle school. I got it in a Scholastic book fair. The The Midnight Library I just tackled. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty decent. The Fault in Our Stars, of course, you know, everybody read that in 2013, 2011, whenever this movie came out, and of course the book was really popular. Darkwood by Emmy Breen. I read 75% probably of this when I was a kid, and then I picked this up a couple years ago and finally finished the story. I loved it. It was so good. I will always keep it on my shelf. I think technically I read The Hunger Games in middle school, but I don't remember a thing about them except for the movies, so I'm going to reread them, and they are all 3 on my physical TBR, and also The Box of the Woods, even though this is like book 3 or 4 out of the series, the Truly Devious series. And then we have my Percy Jackson set that I found for $4 in Goodwill, and also the hardbacks of the Trials of Apollo. This is almost a completed series. I'm missing book 5. I have yet to read any of those books. Lastly, on the shelf we have my Harry Potter collection, minus 2 books that I don't have in full-size hardbacks. I loved the movies as a kid, and I never read the books until last year, and then I read the series and I thought they were so good, except for The Cursed Child. I think that book should have never been made. I also have the Hogwarts library that has Quidditch Through the Ages, The Tales of Beedle the Bard, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And then at the very end I have the Sorcerer's Companion. That I'm not counting on my physical TBR. It's just like a reference extra Harry Potter fanfic type book, I guess you could say. That is every book on my shelf, and also all the books that I have or haven't read. In total, how I said we started the year off with 98 unread books. We went all the way up to 101 unread books on my physical TBR because I bought a couple more books. I'm not necessarily upset, I'm just sad. Also, I gained a couple for a present, so I'll count that as well. But 101 books. I have read technically 11, like finished 11 books, so we could technically be at 90 books on my physical TBR. But like I said, I'm in the process of reading Fourth Wing, and I will finish that book before February ends, so I'm gonna count it as 12 books. That means we only have 89 books on my physical TBR, which is terrible, but considering it's only the start of the year, it's technically the end of the second month, and I have read about 12 books, and also I have only about 89 out of the original 98 or 101 that we started with. I feel like it's a great accomplishment so far, and I feel like we're getting there slowly but surely. The key is to not necessarily go crazy with buying books, which I feel like I've been doing pretty good. I've acquired a lot. I hate to say that, but thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Be sure to check out any book related video here on my channel. I have a playlist down in the description, and of course I hope to see you all in another video here on my channel, and as always, God bless.